It's the Redbird Reboot podcast. Are you ready to get rebooted, Cardinals fans? He settles down, at least in the zone, and does not stop running.
Blake Murphy.
This is the identity for the Arizona Cardinals.
The run defense is just horrendous, and it's been horrendous for the Cardinals for a long time.
And Marcos Labrada.
He's going to bring over his philosophy. It should make it better.
Present the hottest NFL podcast from the country's hottest state.
He should be turning around the logo.
Actually, some breaking news we can cover here. This popped up just about, 6 minutes ago.
It's Redbird Reboot.
Hello there. Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans. Welcome in. It is the Redbird Reboot podcast. We are so excited to talk about an Arizona Cardinals win, the team getting back to 3-5 on the season after a pretty resounding defeat of the Dallas Cowboys. We've had a lot of news that's popped up this week. Some guys who've popped up on the injury list. One player who's heading to the IR for what may be their final snap in Arizona, that being, of course, Kyler Murray. But we get to talk at least a little bit more about a bit of hope for this Cardinal season, ending that 5-game losing streak. Marcos is joining me as well at Pancake Soul. Marcos, first thoughts of the game. It is the only Monday Night Football game, unless the Cardinals make some sort of miraculous way to get flexed back into prime time late against the Rams. This is the only time that you're going to see national televised Cardinals football, where the attention of the country was focused right there on Dallas for the Cardinals. And they showed up pretty well with a solid game from Jacoby Brissett and a better game than maybe we expected against a solid Cowboys offense from the defense and first-round pick Walter Nolan.
Yeah, we only allowed them to score 10 points. They were putting up 40 burgers and constantly putting up like 30 points a game and whatnot. I believe they were third in the when it came to like points per game and whatnot, and they were actually a surprise when it came to like how they were gonna do offensive wise. So to see our defense do something like that you can't say enough about that. And obviously getting some people back was gonna add to that ability to be able to do that. Walter Nolan being number one, I was really impressed with like what Will Johnson did. Denzel Burke, I'm gonna have to give him flowers, even though I don't know why he's in the starting lineup, but he was, and he did really good. And there's a couple other surprises we'll talk about later when it comes to the defense.
Yeah, the game opened up pretty much with Dallas seemingly like they were doing whatever they wanted to. They ran the ball pretty well, were able to run in some chunk plays down the field. And they got down to the Arizona 7-yard line, and that was where the defense had their first hold, and probably, I would say, the first mistake that the Cowboys made. They went for it on 4th and goal from the Arizona 4-yard line. Dak Prescott gets sacked. They had an opportunity to get the ball into the end zone on a long breaking route with Jake Ferguson getting open. But when you're talking about going for it on 4th and goal versus taking points from the 4-yard line, it really, I think in that case, if you're at the 2-yard line, it more favors it, because then you're able to at least plant the opposing offense in a really good spot down, backed up against the goal line. Instead, Dallas, with that sack, it pushed Arizona into pretty solid field position. I think it was a major mistake. The Cardinals were able to make them pay by being able to move down the field. You had Jacoby Brissett on 3rd and 10 picking up 15 yards. And essentially, the Cardinals were able to drive down and get a 48-yard field goal for Chad Ryland. And after that, it was pretty much it until the second half for the Cowboys offense. They punted, you had a fumble, and the Cardinals were able to punch it in with 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually there's a little bit of a situation that they thought that he missed that field goal on that 48-yarder, that it looked like it went over to the right side. I think he kicked it right side of the upright and whatnot. It looked like it just barely inked in. So I thought it was kind of like a good luck situation that like we kick a field goal and it's like that close to being right inside of that upright and whatnot, and it's just the momentum carried over. We saw the momentum start suddenly drop in the fourth quarter, and I was already doing what like a lot of people were doing, just saying like, here we go again. Like I thought we were gonna lose that game.
Yeah, the other thing that stood out from the beginning of the game, Marvin Harrison Jr. picking up an 18-yard pass play, a 15-yard pass play, was used on 4 different targets on the first drive. The most targets he's had, I believe, on an opening drive ever, which is something that's kind of crazy to think about. The second drive, he had a 20-yard catch play ended up with another 7-yard pass play, at least on 1st and 10, and then ended up with a touchdown pass on one of the craziest juke plays that you'll see going up against Deron Bland. With Trevon Diggs out, he has been their best corner. He got paid some $90 million. He looked like he was more of like a $9 million man because Marvin Harrison Jr. took him and sent him to the shadow realm on that one route that he ran, kind of faking like he was going to run to the outside, shifted his feet, just showing off some extremely good leg work and athleticism for someone who's at 6'4", and as we've seen, rocked out at about 215, 220 pounds now, just showing off some of the route running ability. And it showed in a lot of cases. You get him involved early, good things are going to happen. Cardinals ended up being able to cap that off by having a fumble forced on Jake Ferguson, pops up in the air, Budda Baker recovers it. The punt would end up being blocked, I believe, where Dallas was able to return it. We've talked about this all season long, Marcos. The Cardinals are a team that'll often, if the offense was clicking, the defense would give up a play. If the defense was clicking, the offense would give something up. This time, the special teams gave something up. And we have to do a shout out to Marshawn Nealand, at least. There was a moment of silence for him tonight, making that big play. He has since passed away. Truly a tragic situation. That's something I want to make sure that we don't gloss over, is just the importance of human life amidst the game of football. But in the midst of all of that, the special teams has continued to not be as good. It allowed the Cowboys a chance back into the game. Cardinals offense picked it up, was able to get a touchdown. This time that touchdown was to, I believe it was Jacoby Brissett up the middle, led to a Cowboys missed field goal. And you're talking about 17-7 with the Cardinals getting the ball to start the second half. They get a touchdown. Essentially at that point, you realize the game is not over. We can talk a little bit more about the fourth quarter woes for the Cardinals. But at that point, they were dominating the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, and what the turning point was something that like we were expecting this defense to be able to do more often now. It wasn't like it was an interception or like an interception on fourth down. It was a forced fumble. So they were able to get their hands in there and then make the play, and it was made by our rookie. I keep forgetting what his name is, Cody Simon. So Cody Simon coming in for some reps, in for Mac Wilson, and this is an issue that I have with some of these veteran linebackers. Is at some certain point when they take the mic position, the playmaking ability kind of goes away. Mac Wilson, you saw him drop an interception early in that game. That one of those easy interceptions that you kind of overthink, and then you just end up dropping it and whatnot. Big difference maker. Reminds me of Jordan Hicks that first time that we met the Cowboys in 2020 when we go play them away and whatnot. Jordan Hicks is able to get a ball that was kind of like tipped by I can't believe it. It always happens to me whenever I always forget these names, but it was our guy that's now playing for the Jacksonville Jaguars, our pass rushing little specialist.
Dennis Gardeck.
Dennis Gardeck. That he was able to get to the quarterback and influence that pass by Andy Dalton. He throws it up straight up in the air. It's up for grabs for Jordan Hicks. Jordan Hicks dives for it, has it in his hands, and drops it. So I'm like, okay, we're watching Mac Wilson turn into the new Jordan Hicks again, and it seems like it always happens on the second year. But Cody Simon came in and gave some life. He comes in and he is hungrier, obviously, because he wants to get those reps. Eventually, he wants to take the starter position. So when he had the opportunity to get his hand in there and rip it out, he did so, and that actually was what I would say the momentum shifter and what won us the game right there.
Yeah, it's something I think that when you're talking about forcing turnovers, Cardinals gave up one, but they were able to force 3. That's one of the things that we saw at the end of the game. It really ultimately was the difference in the game when you're talking about why the score wasn't a close game. It shows this defense has struggled to make some turnovers this year. Being able to go out there, I think, has to be a good feeling. And part of that, I think, has to come down to Walter Nolan, which we'll talk about in a second, but I do want us to make sure that we're not glossing over Marvin Harrison Jr.'s performance. Trey McBride has been pretty consistent since whoever's been at quarterback. You take a look at some of the game logs that popped up there. 6 catches for 61 yards, 6 catches for 78 yards. You go back down to even the Tennessee game, 5 catches for 41 yards. He's had catches of 8 receptions, 10 receptions. He had 5 against Dallas. The only reason why I think that he didn't get as many receptions is because some of those went to Marvin Harrison Jr., who had a 10-target game for the first time since the Seattle Seahawks game. And we saw in the Seattle Seahawks game, that was where Marv kind of had his second half breakout with the 6 catches for 66 yards and the 1 touchdown. Marv is the guy who's really benefited the most. He's gotten maybe not a big bump in terms of targets since Jacoby has taken over, but in this game he really did. And I think that there is a big reason why that we can talk about Marcos, because call it conspiracy corner or whatever you want to say, but the Arizona Cardinals apparently changed their team game plan. It was I believe it was the week before, night before. And the reason for that, we're going to speculate here, is this article drops on November 3rd, just ahead of the game, that Marvin Harrison Jr.'s dad struggles to watch him play. Says that it's hard for him to watch the Cardinals offense, and you can quote me on that. Wow. Yeah, that was something at least where you saw that drop for the most part. And that was really difficult because it's something we've all kind of agreed with. What we talked about with Jonathan Gannon, he said that they made some changes to the Marvin Harrison Jr. game plan and gave him his passing plays up first. So we saw him at 4 targets in a quarter. The day that the Cardinals offense gets called out, sounds like they made an adjustment on the game plan in the moment, and the Cardinals reap the benefits. I don't like how it is with this coaching staff, Marcos, at least when it comes to just the way that things are going to be set up. But one thing I think that we can at least hopefully agree with is the fact that good things happen when you throw Marvin Harrison Jr. the ball. There have been tough times and some rough sledding. There's been some mistakes that have popped up, but it seems like he's turned the corner. The problem I think we're talking about here at the Cardinals fans is if you need to have Marvin Harrison Sr. speak out to get his son the ball 10 targets, it was his first time of having 7 catches or more in his career, which is a surprise to people. It feels like this coaching staff has simply not, they've been giving themselves a gift for Christmas. They just haven't opened it up yet, Marcos.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's 2 different ways of being able to read that, and there could be another thing that could come up with, like, Marvin Harrison Sr. kind of putting his, his thoughts out there, and, being that as it may, that it was the day before the Cowboys game. I don't have any issues with it, but I'm not saying that because I'm a Marvin Harrison Jr. fan. It's because I kind of do want people to, like, say what is possibly going through their minds when it comes to any type of situations. Now, once again, talked about the offense. When they talk about featuring somebody, Marv's usually, when he's playing a certain role and people want him to get more featured, I don't want it to be a situation where we're doing it just so we can get it out of the way. I still wanted to do it because it helps the offense move along. Because the thing is, Marvin Harrison Jr. on those chunk plays, it's what's going to get this offense going and be more efficient, and not so much on, somewhat like choice routes. I can 100% speak from that with Kurt Warner having the same sentiment, saying like, hey, you want him to do what he does best. You don't just want to put him in a situation where he's going to do something just because you want him to do it so he can get more targets. I'd rather him get those 13-yard comeback routes, the out routes, the dig routes, the deep end routes, the crossing routes, those type of routes that keep him going when he burns somebody off the line of scrimmage. Obviously, he's one-on-one, like the situation with Deron Bland, where he's one-on-one. If Deron Bland hadn't fallen, it wouldn't have mattered. He still would have been open on that because of the body and the amount that, the frame that he has and the ability for somebody to be able to throw it on the slant route right there, and there's no deep safety to blow him up or anything like that. So he still would have gotten the ball in that situation. Those are what I talk about when I say, hey, that's a winning formula right there. A winning formula isn't like, hey, let's just get him a jet sweep. Hey, let's throw him some screens, or let's have him do choice routes. That's the worst thing you can do to somebody like that, because on choice routes, those type of routes are just a quick little 4-yard hitch routes that usually end up in a tackle or usually have a confusion between him and the quarterback. Chemistry needs to be deeply involved with that, because you have to know, and Kurt Warner mentioned this as well, with choice routes, you have to know which direction they're going to go and what you anticipate if they're seeing the same thing that you're seeing, and which leverage are you going to attack. I don't want to put that on his plate like that, because I don't see him as like a possession receiver. I see him as like a guy who averages 14 yards a catch or 15 yards a catch, like the old school Larry Fitzgerald, Alquan Bolden years, where they were like the guys, but they were the 2X receivers that dominated their one-on-one matchups and whatnot. And you were able to get it to them, down the field more so, and you reserve like the Steve Breston role, which would be like more of the shorter, like yak routes and whatnot, to like more of the people who are specialized. Greg Dortch, Zay Jones to a certain degree, and Trey McBride, who's like obviously the choice route king in the situation. He knows how to attack leverage, and obviously you want to put those guys in those roles. Now, that being said, I do think that it lit a fire under the stomach, and it put a fire in people's bellies to be able to just say, you know what, let's get it over with. Let's just go ahead and see what this looks like, and it looks damn good. Putting the first focus on Marvin Harrison Jr. on these routes looked damn good, and they should continue doing it. I think you're muted.
That's correct. Yeah, and I agree with all that, and I think I'll add on the way that the Cardinals want to run their offense. We talked about the height of the quarterback, running a lot more play action. First game back, they ran 17, I think it was 16 play action passes from under center. With Kyler Murray, they'd run 17 all season long from under center. This is just part of what the Jacoby Brissett offense is, more of what they want to do with Drew Petzing. They want to spam being able to have the quarterback fake handing the ball off, turn his back. What they also like to do is this Kevin Stefanski offense we've talked about from Cleveland. Jacoby was there in Cleveland, came originally from the Vikings, just tracing back to all of that history. What they want to do is be able to bring in, get the two tight end sets that are lined up. This is something that you can listen to the Mina Kimes podcast. This is something that comes from us, but we can quote it because we've seen the same thing. Bring in everyone tight, bring in your base defense. You're not having to worry about playing nickel. Leaves Marvin Harrison Jr. one-on-one on the outside. In theory, that's why you draft Marv, to be able to be that guy that you can go to one-on-one. Cowboys spent most of their time in their base defense. They played a lot of man-to-man coverage. They really had Marvin just being able to kind of eat it up. And when they did drop back into zone, that was where we got to see Michael Wilson was able to make a fantastic play down the field. As they dropped back into zone, pass rush wasn't able to get home. A nice 50-yard ball deep over the middle of the field. Hitting him in stride, and then being able to see Trey McBride being able to eat up some of that zone coverage underneath. He had a couple of times that he would just sit in this off zone, catch the ball, break a tackle, and pick up the first down. That's the way they want their offense to run. And talking about some of what we said last season, part of the transition, when we'll talk about Kyler Murray and the height and Russell Wilson, I think the Cardinals have been going through something like the Seattle Seahawks went through a couple years ago. They switched to a taller quarterback who's much more of a traditional pocket passer, hangs in the pocket, takes the hit, delivers the ball on time. Moving away from a more chaotic playmaker who needs to be able to have some of that space, have some of that room in front of him to be able to throw, in Kyler Murray, to kind of where the rest of the league has been going, with being able to spam a lot of the play action passes to be able to beat a lot of these cover two looks, where you don't have a cover one deep passing zone. Cardinals got quite a bit of cover one, I think, at least with this Cowboys game. That was part of where, when you take a look back on some of the tape, there was quite a bit of quarters, but because the Cardinals were able to bring in and condense stuff against the run, that left Marvin Harrison Jr. one-on-one quite a bit. And we saw the Cowboys eventually make an adjustment the second half to kind of dropping back, playing a bit of zone. Cardinals were able to still be able to make things happen with that field goal in the third quarter. Marcos, the fourth quarter still had struggles. Cardinals in the fourth quarter, punt, turnover on downs, which the turnover on downs, unless I am mistaken at least, was 4th and 8, which I felt like was, even though you're up quite a bit, they did that pass to Marvin Harrison Jr., kind of skipped into the ground. He was open, like they had the pass play. Maybe Jacoby take another hit or two. But where it came down to, at least, was that the Cardinals still have a negative, like they added another touchdown to that point differential. So the offense has still seen some struggles. We haven't seen them be able to move the ball effectively on the ground. And when it's in these must run situations, they're not able to run the ball. So that's going to put Jacoby back into these places. He was sacked on the first play in the fourth quarter. In the second quarter, he was sacked twice. And the Cardinals were fortunate, at least at the end of the game, that they were able to knock off a couple of different sacks from Calais Campbell to be able to get out of the game, because with 2 minutes and 31 seconds left, the Cowboys field goal miss and not taking the one field goal, that was a mistake that I think, Marcos, when we got to the end of the game, we realized, oh, Cowboys, right now the score, they should have 23-27. It should be a one-score game. Instead, the Cowboys go for it on fourth down. They miss the 68-yard field goal, the first miss from 60 plus of all the entire season from Brandon Aubrey. So a little bit interesting that you expect him to be able to make it, but again, it is the new NFL record for a reason at 68 yards. I think the biggest takeaway at the end of the game was there was almost no question as to who the quarterback was going to be. And on the offense, it just felt like the things were so much more functional as far as even with the fourth quarter struggles, kind of gave you the confidence that, and this is where we can probably cap off talking about the offense, that moving forward, you can see enough reason for this coaching staff to say, hey, you get us a young quarterback with Jacoby Brissett, we deserve a chance to come back here in 2026. And I think that's something that with the last couple of weeks, we've seen some gains with Jacoby. We finally got to see a bit of it pay off this past Monday.
Yeah, and we would be talking about something completely different if they would at least try to win like the last two games as well before the Cowboys game. If this was like a situation where it was like 2-1 for Jacoby or 3-0, it would just be definitive at that point. It's just funny because of the fact that like the defense didn't play as well as they did when Kyler Murray was in the game. So just things don't line up like the way they did, but they did line up for this game, and obviously main factors being that you get some players back that you didn't have. They were either out, they were out with an injury, and once you reinstall them into the defense, they get to move back into the parts that they need to be. So, for instance, Walter Nolan. So him coming back and making his return, and I know we're not like go super in depth on this right now, but I'm just using this.
We can go ahead and talk about it because Walter Nolan deserves to be talked about.
All right, let's do it. So with Walter Nolan sliding into that defensive tackle spot, like around the 3 tech to even the 5 technique, which is usually like kind of like the edge position, him showing the explosiveness, the fresh legs that he has because he hasn't played a single game before that, and not only doing that, but using some pass rush moves from the interior. It shows that the type of progression that he's done as a pass rusher, as well as the fact that we know that he's a good run defender. So that helps out immensely when it comes to like being able to sort out everybody else's role towards the outside. Darius Robinson was kind of quiet as far as the stats look, but as far as the film looked, he started doing some things that I was praying to God they would either learn or start doing and stuff. So one of the things that I really liked about Darius was he was not just giving up on his first burst. He was splitting the double teams. So when you split your double teams, you obviously lead with either your near shoulder, try to get right through, open the gate on one of the guys, and then just the other offensive lineman is just going to be you're wedged in between them, so you shoot right through. He was doing stuff like that, whereas before he would get flushed out, and it would be a situation where he just tried to resort to power too much, and now he was just trying to see if he could get like a win, even if he didn't win with power. So that's why he was doing a lot better in these circumstances than he was before. So with that being said, like with Walter Nolan also being back in the depth chart and commanding so many snaps, that also makes Darius Robinson have to up his game more because of the fact that, people were looking at him and they were kind of disappointed. And now you have this guy who's just going to come in as a rookie and then outplay you. Yeah, that's going to create some competition.
Yeah, and I think while there's slightly different positions that are there, it does make a lot of sense because what we've wondered about with why the Cardinals drafted Walter Nolan in the first place. The answer, of course, is because when you look at how they built their defense, getting a guy who's got length and speed on the outside, getting Calais Campbell's length up the middle and ability to shed blocks, getting someone who's a run stuffer on one side in Zaven Collins, or the guy who's also going to be more of your athletic, smaller guy who's quicker in Baron Browning on the other side, or putting Darius Robinson with that length, you got to get someone quick and explosive. That's one of those things that I think when we talked about with the draft and the selection, well, I was leaning toward right tackle because I was not liking the fact of where the Cardinals were. I was able to say, they need an heir apparent to Calais Campbell. They need somebody who's going to be able to come in and be able to learn alongside him in a win now year, who can be explosive. And that is exactly what Walter Nolan has been able to be so far in his first game. He had one sack, one pass defense. He actually kept his hands up, and when he couldn't get to the quarterback, was able to knock the ball down in a big play, and had another sack, which involved him essentially just not quite teleporting, but just showing off the explosive nature of being able to say that 300-pound men are not supposed to move that quickly. He was able to just get past Tyler Smith, who's a Pro Bowl caliber guard, and was able to then get past Dak Prescott, wrap the arm around, be able to use the tackle, bring him in a very, I guess you could be able to say, key situation, because it did lead to, I believe, in that spot. I'm going to double check to see for sure. I believe that sack led to, I think it was on third down. Yeah, the first sack that was there was Josh Sweat, but the Walter Nolan sack, uh, I'll double check and see when the exact position was for that. But it was one of those places where, when you're talking about having a generational sort of draft where you can talk about finding players that are able to keep making plays for your team multiple years down the road. One of the last times we saw that in Arizona was in 2019. Kyler Murray, 7 years or so. It took a full 4 years, but Byron Murphy's still in the league. Zach Allen's making plays. He's actually, as we're recording this on a Thursday night, has been making plays for the Denver Broncos. Jalen Thompson is still with the Arizona Cardinals. Being able to have one of those things where you stack a bunch of talent in one draft, and from what we've seen so far, we've already seen Will Johnson be able to play. We can talk about if he'll be available or not, since he did not practice today, and I do think that he may have gotten hurt on the final play of the game. He kind of had a player run into his legs, so it wouldn't shock me if he ends up being limited or not practicing throughout this week. But when you get to see with Walter Nolan out there, Jordan Birch, we've already talked a little bit about Cody Simon forcing that final fumble on the game. He had a great coverage grade overall as well. And being able to have another corner with Max Melton being injured coming in, who had a great game in Denzel Burke, the local Arizona product, you start to kind of see stacking those different draft picks loads your team not just with talent for here and now, Marcos, but for the future, because these are just rookies. They're going to be hitting their prime in 2026, 2027, even 2028, you would hope. And being able to have some high caliber talent on this defensive side of the ball is going to be one of those things that helps Arizona win games. And it was really good to see the Walter Nolan impact be so immediate. It was able to get the Cardinals a win with a dominant defensive performance, for the likes of which we really had seen throughout the season, but had not seen in a complete game sort of portion that we got to see it on Monday.
Yeah, it would be awesome to like draft somebody and then develop him to like an all pro type of defensive tackle. Because as far as we're concerned, like I will say that Josh Sweat is, not only did he have a better game than I thought, I still have my little issues with him and his effort. But when it comes to him getting to the quarterback, he did a really good job in this game and whatnot. So you have somewhat of an established person on the outside. You're seeing better play from Zaven Collins. He's having these crazy like bursts, like whether it's up the middle or whatnot, or just beating his guy outside, and even having like these crazy bull rushes. But the problem is that he's not finishing, and it's not showing up in the stat sheet, unfortunately. But he's putting himself in that position where he could be like a really good rotational guy looking forward. And BJ Ojulari, we're still yet to see what he can do, but these are names to the outside that you can trust, aside from Baron Browning as well. Then on the interior, you have Calais Campbell, but you're going to assume that he's going to retire after this year unless he wants to run it back again. And pretty much that's it when you talk about like interior pass rushers, not just run stoppers, people who can make impacts in the middle. Darius Robinson, we still got to see more. Obviously, he had a better game, but we still don't know if he's going to be an impact maker. But seeing what Walter Nolan did and having to like stand out on the broadcast view, not on the film, on the broadcast view, where people had their impressions because he was making impacts. He batted the ball down. He had 4 tackles. One that he actually chased down on CeeDee Lamb was when he was making everybody miss. Yep. Goes and just doesn't stop with his effort. He just like he does this double. He moves over two gaps over. It's not really much of a stunt, but he just runs over 2 gaps, is able to penetrate like the protection. But CeeDee Lamb already has the ball by this time. He's making everybody miss. He just continues to go after just to make a tackle, because hey, even though there's Cardinals everywhere trying to make the tackle on him, he doesn't care. He's gonna either If they don't catch up to him, he's just gonna close in, and he goes and makes a tackle, and then does the humble thing, and then picks up CeeDee Lamb right after that. And you saw that when you don't have to watch the film and you see the impact. That's great news for a defensive tackle.
Yeah, definitely something as far as when it came to the amount of effort, like you talked about, being able to have that. That's something that you're hoping for, because that was the biggest concern with him coming out was, is his head going to be on straight? And we said that it's either going to be he's going to take what Calais has learned and he's going to disregard it, and that's going to be the Kondichi route, or he's going to basically take what he's going to learn from the older player and be able to make himself into a stud. He got a shout out from the Aaron Donald of all people, who was raving about how he'd looked in his first game. I don't think that's the comparison that you want to have, because that's like one of the greatest football players, I would argue, of all time that we've seen. But it's really helpful to be able to see at least the kind of completion of this Cardinals being healthy for the first time, being able to not just spell Calais, who had 2 sacks, the ageless wonder, late in the game. Being able to allow Calais to kind of do his role and being able to do his. Speaking of Josh Sweat, he had 11 pressures with 2 sacks, 2 hits, 7 hurries, and 6 tackles against the Cowboys. He really went off, the former Philadelphia Eagle against the former division rival. He's just continued to be able to be a really good signing for the Arizona Cardinals ultimately. I agree with you in that it maybe is not going to be the Chandler Jones sort of signing that you're going to have, that you're expecting of like a guy who is consistently going to be up there in 17 sacks a year. But we're already seeing that he's going to be a double-digit sack guy, and he's going to probably surpass that, get maybe about 14, 15 sacks or so this season. He's on pace for, if healthy. It's just something that's exciting to be able to see, because like you said, on the back end, we've gotten good play from Will Johnson, having Denzel Burke and the backup there. You could tell there was times that Dak Prescott had to hold on to the ball a bit longer than he was comfortable with, because he didn't have the quick out to CeeDee Lamb, didn't have the quick out to George Pickens. You mentioned how they tried to get the ball to Lamb, and seeing that hustle to be able to make the tackle was something that I think was important, not just for the future, but to be able to say, yeah, this guy's got a hankering for the game, that you really would love to be able to see what he can look like as that game continues to develop. Let's go ahead and take a quick pause so we can hit halftime here and get through some comments on the Redbird Reboot podcast. Do a couple of shout outs to that. We got Silver Wolf over here in the chat saying, let's go. Thanks for always tuning in, Silver Wolf. Appreciate you. We got Red Feather Workshop, at least, is coming in. I think that previously has been Dana. Looks like the profile picture is then the same. Currently 3-5. Each game will close. It feels like each game will matter. I think it's going to start with, can the Cardinals be able to win a game against the Seahawks? Because 4-5, much better than 3-6 when it comes down to that. That's something where you're going to need to try to get as close to 500 as you can before the end of the year. AZ Jones is wondering at least if they want a taller quarterback. Also says, would the Kyler situation be different if we had 100% healthy defense? Great question. I think that when you talk about offense and defense, I always grade the two of them separately, because they're never on the field at the same time. They don't affect each other. I think that the impact comes in terms of game flow and time. If your offense can't run the ball, you're always throwing, you're taking sacks, defenses on the field, you get exhausted. Maybe that's part of it. I think the lack of turnovers, getting a positive field percentage, is a little part of it. But when it comes down to what we've seen with the offense as a whole, it's been on these deep passing plays, getting the ball out on time, the increased yardage and usage for the non-Marvin and non-Trey McBride receivers. They're just throwing deep has been one of the biggest areas too. Cardinals have gone from being one of the worst teams on 3rd and 10 to one of the best teams on 3rd and 10 behind Jacoby Brissett. We've got AZ Jones is also shooting out, say Walter Nolan helps, Sweat, D-Rob, and Campbell. Totally agree. And then we're going to have one more, at least for now, we'll talk about with Red Feather Workshop. The opposing D-line ending up in the background before the handoff or fake is an issue on offense. This is part of when we talk about the Cardinals just spamming the play action passes. A lot of times the defenses are still keyed into it. What I think it does, though, is it allows Jacoby a little bit more space to be able to operate. So even if they get into the backfield a little bit quicker, there's just a little bit of space of being able to have the fake that they're running and being able to force the opposing defense to have to respect the run. Because if you do not respect the run as a defense, you just play pass, all of a sudden you're going to be 2 steps or so behind. That angle is going to cause you, if they do hand the ball off, for a guy to be able to just run right past you, break that angle, and then suddenly you've given up a 10-yard run and a 15-yard run just while trying to be able to make sure you're playing the pass. You were really ended up with a worse result than if you had just been able to play the run and go back and be a disciplined football player to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I was looking for one of my clips that I wanted to upload. It was about Will Johnson because we've been giving this defensive line a bunch of love and whatnot, and the coverage did not only did they come through and did a wonderful job and a great job as it comes to like Denzel Burke, of course, getting that high grade, and Will Johnson, but like watch, I'll just upload this clip because this is probably one of the best like. I said that it was like a swaggy type of of a stop by Will Johnson. That's exactly what I titled this, and it's more so because of the fact that he was able to close in on this route, make the tackle on CeeDee Lamb, forcing completion, and then just do that little celebration that he did. It was just like, to me, it was reminiscent of somebody who has high confidence in themselves and already thinks of themselves as like a lockdown type of a cornerback.
Mhm.
So as you can see, he times it correctly, times it perfectly. Actually, this type of route right here, usually it's meant to attack like off, you know, basically off coverage. Anything that's like a man, that's like a zone type of coverage where you're bailing, you're using bail technique. You have zone turn where your back's towards the boundary and whatnot. You're just looking at the quarterback, but you're trying to keep your eye on the wide receiver at the same time. So you're sidestepping. You're not really backpedaling. You're not really turning your hips and turning and burning or anything like that. You're just sidestepping. That allows these wide receivers to be able to attack the blind spot behind you, and even if they're attacking right in front of you, it's hard for you to T-step and try to make a recovery on it. There's only so many athletes that can do that. But this is what you get when you get a tail on somebody. See, he's turning it towards the inside. He knows that he's about to
Mhm.
get the ball because he's looking at he's looking over at Dak Prescott getting ready. I'm not sure if he pats the ball. I don't know if he's one of those quarterbacks that nah, it doesn't seem like he's a person who pats the ball, but that's a tell. So he's kind of jerking the ball and stuff. When you see that jerk, that movement, and the shoulder turn, that's when you know the ball's either going to get released or not. You want to close in on that route, even if he doesn't throw that ball. You want to close in on it. So that's just like him being just like a high IQ player right off the bat, breaking on the
Yep.
ball, making the tackle at the
Great
perfect
timing,
time.
great recovery speed, keeps him in his pocket so he's not able to bite on the double move. Like you said, it's one of those plays that you expect an elite player to be able to make, and he's already playing at a high level. It'll be interesting to see because if he ends up missing the Seahawks game, I think that he would have missed both the Seahawks games this year with Jackson Smith and Jigba on the other side due to injury. So the hope is that he's willing to go. But it does feel like in a lot of cases, Marcos, as people have said, the Cardinals were a franchise that had a top 10 talent fall to them in Walter Nolan and another top 10 talent fall to them in the second round with Will Johnson. And that's
Yeah,
something that gives you a lot of hope for the future if you're a Cardinals fan, considering how bad this defense has been over the past couple of years since they let go of Byron Murphy, JJ Watt retired. You saw a guy in Zach Allen's making plays now for an AFC West team instead of the NFC West team. It's something that is really going to be a feather in the cap of Monty Austin for it to be able to get rookie playmakers this quickly.
Yeah, well, if you look at the top defenses and whatnot, like, so it is a feather in the cap if you're able to get a good starting outside cornerback that, like I mentioned, just with Will Johnson, that he made that type of a play that like a lot of other cornerbacks would do. But the confidence is what I'm looking at because he knows what he's looking at as a rookie. He's graded really well. He had one bad game, and I will say that Packers game, he did let one go on us, and I think had he just taken that play seriously, I think we win this game. I'm not going to even talk about that right now because we're not talking about the Packers. But he moved off from that game, off the bye week. Probably looked back at the film, maybe had like, not sure if Gannon's doing the same thing he was doing in Philly, where he was pointing out plays and saying like, "All right, what happened in this play?" Bringing somebody up and then saying, "Did you try? Was it effort? Did you slack off or take the play off?" That type of stuff. But Will Johnson definitely looks at film, and if he looked at himself, he's pretty disappointed at his play. He bounced back in this game, and the top defenses have a shutdown guy on the outside, somebody that can take receivers number one take on the number one receiver, but also a game breaking defensive tackle or a game breaking outside linebacker. Those two people go hand in hand because they help each other, and it actually turns out to to lead to more turnovers in the long run.
Yeah, I think with the Cardinals defense, like you talked about, the way that they've been built up, the biggest issue that I've run into with them has been they had a stud linebacker, and this is not the way Jonathan Gannon is going to build his team. But if they have a stud linebacker, you're kind of seeing them make it with safeties instead, where they've got Buda Baker being able to be the guy that will blitz. We saw with Mac Wilson being productive. Without Mac against the Seahawks, that's going to be something that I could see that being a huge struggle for the team, because he's been very valuable this year. He hasn't been playing at an all pro level, hasn't been even playing, I would say, at a Pro Bowl level. He's been playing at a solid level, which shows it's been one of the good signings that the Cardinals have had. Let's talk now a little bit, now that we've talked about the defense. Let's go ahead and shift to the big conversation. This is with Kyler Murray going on to IR. It's going to be something that we can at least say is that this is a possibility. He never gets activated off of IR. He's going to miss the last 4 games. Next 4 games, excuse me. So here's how the timeline goes. Kyler Murray seems like he's coming back to go into Dallas. Kyler Murray's been practicing limited. Kyler Murray is seen throwing to the backups, despite it originally being reported that he was throwing to the starters as usual. This is where the media people were talking about, where they said, oh, here's video. Kyler's not throwing to, in the open portion of practice, not throwing to the starters. He is back out there, no limp that we can see. Jacoby is essentially anointed as the starter for the Dallas game because Kyler just isn't quite healthy there yet. He needs some time for his foot. Post game, you have Jonathan Gannon shares, yep, I think we're going to have Jacoby as our guy moving forward. We like where he's at. There's some people have taken it a little bit of the context and tried to twist it, but the answer to all of that is, at the end of the day, this is probably where it sits, Marcos, is that the Cardinals are ready to move on from Kyler Murray, and Kyler Murray is ready to move on from the Arizona Cardinals. That's going to be where this is essentially putting him into a spot, as most people are suspecting, and we think too, where you don't have to worry about throwing him out there. He tears an ACL. Suddenly, you can't trade him. You can't really cut him because of the injury guarantee clause that's in place. It just feels like the Cardinals are ready to move on to a different quarterback, whether that's going to be a better quarterback, a taller quarterback, maybe not a more athletic quarterback, but a more traditional quarterback. And you can kind of feel like that we've seen enough from Jacoby. Some people have wondered, could this be the second coming of Palmer or Warner? He's 32 years old. We haven't really seen him take off in that same sense, but I do think that the stratosphere of him being a competent starter in a way that Kyler Murray had been kind of a below average starter, that's something that I think is really interesting to be able to look at, because the Cardinals are now going to be walking into 2026 kind of blind, because you've got your regular starter in Jacoby, but you do not have a long-term option at quarterback for the first time since, I would argue, that 2020 season when Kyler Murray came in after having a solid Rookie of the Year performance in 2019.
Yeah, so that's gonna be kind of a new territory for us because for the last 7 years we knew who was gonna be the starter of this offense, and you know, aside from the my issues with signing somebody who's a competent backup and stuff, they went ahead and did so this year, and you saw what kind of dividends that came, that kind of paid by getting somebody who's not only just a person who's had some good seasons in his NFL career, hasn't been able to dethrone and become a consistent starter, but now is showing that being in a system that he was familiar with back with the Browns, and then rerunning that kind of same system with, I would argue, better weapons and whatnot, is showing that he can be competent at being able to run that system. It's just new territory because when we would think about past Cardinal seasons with quarterbacks, it was either getting somebody who's either a veteran who the team gave up on, or the team just, he was good at one point, but he's just not looking as good as he was in past years, or we just either try to draft and develop somebody in those two people, or Josh Rosen and Matt Leinart, they just didn't pan out as long-term starters. There was maybe some things that you saw in them where you thought they could be the starter, but they weren't able to get that position going. And then you draft this guy, number 1 overall. You punt on the past quarterback. You start with this new guy. This guy has
Punt
all
on
this
Nick
talent.
Bosa, punt on Quinnen Williams, who just got traded from the Jets as well.
Yeah, that's crazy to even think about that. So like now you got this guy, and then he transcends what expectations you had about the past, rookie quarterbacks that you had. You're like, oh wow, he's not only become a consistent starter. We don't have to worry about quarterback anymore in the first round. We are now like, competent team. He's gone to 2 Pro Bowls. He won the Rookie of the Year. Like, so he's having all these accolades, and plus, he leads a team to go to like undefeated up until we play the Packers and whatnot. So these things are what we weren't used to. So that when we had this, we were like, okay, this is awesome. Let's do everything we can to try to like get him to success. Then we give him another 3 or 4 years, and we're like, it's just not working out. Okay.
Yeah.
So now we have to redo it again, and I would say as fans, we have to have some expectations and know that the learning curve has to be in a way where not only does he have to have good, like, the learning curve has to be there where he's going to have to operate this type of offense that's ran by 70% to 80% of the teams in the NFL, but that this coaching staff is possibly going to have another year because they're that's the way that they're going to finagle another year is by saying we need our quarterback. Kyler Murray wasn't our guy. We didn't select him. We try to make it work. It's not working out. Give us another year with a new quarterback and whatnot. Jacoby Brissett has shown that he can run the offense, and now we're in a position where we're in a way kind of like in, hey, if we win games with Jacoby Brissett, it shows that he can run the offense. He might be the starter, but we're not going to be in position to be drafting a quarterback high. But if we lose out, then we're in the talks of the next quarterback that's going to be the next franchise guy. And then, of course, we do what we do during the offseason with Kyler Murray, which could be trading him away.
Yeah, and it's like we talked a bit about the issues with Kyler, with the questions of the height, the Russell Wilson impact. They never had a defense like Russell Wilson had. He did have situations that were good around him. He had DeAndre Hopkins on one side. We were able to talk at least about how they always had. He was able to get Trey McBride in 2022, and we got to see that connection thrive in 2023 and 2024, especially, despite the lack of touchdown production. What we kind of have seen is that, like, the consistency that Kyler Murray has not been able to have within some electrifying plays, it was worth, I think, being able to take on him as a draft pick. Worth it, I think, also to pay him, especially when you consider how difficult it would be as far as the market. I know the preference I said I had was either you can trade him for, at the time, a couple of first round picks, but then you're talking about the 2022 season, which, if you take a look back at the quarterbacks of the 2022 NFL draft, it was the worst quarterback, probably of worst quarterback draft, I want to say, of however long it was. The guy who went in the first round that year was, I believe it was to the Steelers, Kenny Pickett. Did not turn out at all whatsoever. So the Cardinals were kind of stuck as far as they didn't have any options to move off of Kyler Murray. Even in the 2024 NFL draft, where the Cardinals were outside of the top 3 quarterbacks, you're looking at passing on Marvin Harrison Jr. versus pairing him with Kyler Murray. I think that the decisions the Cardinals have made also have been tied to that contract, which was handed out. I think that Kyler had more leverage than Steve Keim and Cliff Kingsbury had, especially because Keim and Cliff got signed to 5-year deals. Kyler was looking to get paid like the rest of the other quarterbacks who had been to the playoffs at that point. Whereas I felt like a 2 to 3 year extension for Cliff Kingsbury and Steve Keim probably would have sufficed, and instead they're still paying all of those contracts off. As far as it goes with Kyler Murray, I think that the biggest question is going to be, is there going to be a team that's going to trade for him? What is the impact to the Cardinals as far as his contract details for when they do get to trade him? What does that look like? And then finally, if they do end up having no choice, would they indeed end up going and cutting him? So I'm going to do a quick screen share here so we can be able to go a little bit in depth as to what this may actually look like. All right, let me just go ahead here and get this pulled up for you folks so you can see it nice there on the screen. So for Kyler contract, at least, he's signed through the 2028 NFL season. He's in the last year, I would say, as far as of being cut, traded, or anything like that. If you were to release him in 2025, trade him anytime after, you'd be talking about some 18 million's worth of savings, but you're talking about a huge amount, at least, of dead cap that would have popped up here. So that's something, at least with Kyler Murray's contract with the $43 million cap hit. While he does have a cap hit of 53 and 43 million, you take a look at what the actual signing is for each of those, and it's relatively doable. You can get out of the 2026 contract um, with essentially just the 57 million in terms of dead cap is the biggest area. I think it makes more sense for you to be able to trade him than it does to cut him, even if you're taking on less. You're going to be getting a little bit of savings. I think the Cardinals could take on a little bit of some of the cap hit to be able to get it rid of. But when we're talking about the amount of dead money, the last out that they could have had really wasn't until after this season, because he was making 37 million and then had cap hits of 49 million, 43 million. The dead cap, after, if they had moved on in 2024, would have been $112 million if they had moved on. This year, the dead cap of between 42 and 57, far more doable. I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that we've heard from Benjamin Albright has talked a little bit about the fact that he thinks that the Cardinals and Kyler Murray could end up seeing a move made somewhere to the East Coast. And if you want to talk about kind of the suspicions about, is Albright know what's happening, what's going on with any of those areas here, what's the sourcing behind all of that? The answer is that he's a Denver guy, covers the Denver Broncos, and the New York Jets GM came from the Denver Broncos system. Also, originally is from Arizona. Interestingly enough, I think he went to college out at U of A, or was a part of U of A as a product. And the New York Jets are a team that just dumped a lot of players, dumped a lot as far as they kind of have very little for next year. If they go out and start a rookie quarterback, he's going to get destroyed. You're probably in a better shape being able to make a trade for a Kyler Murray, give up some draft picks. That may give the Cardinals some draft picks, Marcos, because as we've taken a look at how could the Cardinals address it, do they roll with Jacoby? At 32 years old, I think you have to hedge that a little bit. I think if there's a quarterback that you love in the 2026 NFL draft, I think this is the opportunity to go up and get them using some of those draft picks from Kyler Murray to then address your need at right tackle. Because when we talk about how this team has been built, they have talent that I think could take on a rookie quarterback. Because you take a look at the depth chart for the Arizona Cardinals, it really is stacked up pretty well, where they've got young talent on offense. They've got a lot now of young talent on defense. The biggest thing that they need is going to be figuring out what are they doing at the running back spot? What are they going to be doing as far as the interior of the offensive line after Will Hernandez is gone? But otherwise, Marcos, it's set up with a pretty talented roster overall that's not going to throw a rookie quarterback out of the frying pan and into the fire. That, I think, is encouraging enough to let Cardinals fans know that there is an opportunity to try this again.
Yeah, and hopefully have like a better base than what we had when we got Kyler Murray. And that 2018 team had like pieces in place, but it wasn't enough, and there was a lot of injuries. When 2019 came around and we drafted Kyler Murray, we had brought more pieces over, made that offensive line from the worst offensive line to at least a top 10 when it comes to pass protection. And it's kind of weird to even hear that's how that offensive line was, but that offensive line was horrible. And once again, the weapons you were dealing with, they were like subpar in 2018. So that's part of the reason why people were saying that Josh Rosen maybe should get another year, but it is what it is. So now we have all these weapons. We don't have what I would say is like a top 10 offensive line right now. We have one side that's solidified, at least 3 players deep, but the other two, which is, the right side of the offensive line, is problematic. So if you go on and you fix that part of the offensive line, you get maybe Trey Benson back. Maybe I'm not sure if James Conner is going to be returning, if they want him to return and whatnot, or what you do. But DeMarcado was looking really good this past game. So you maybe have some good, like deep depth when it comes to like running back. And this rookie is going to be coming in, and, I don't believe that he's going to be starting right away, but he will have to take the helm at some point. Once he takes the helm, he's not going to be looking like he's coming into a team like Josh Rosen did in 2018. At the very least, you could say there's a good base, and the defense being that it has all this young talent, and it's like what I would consider like a good defense on a great day, on a good day. and it could be a top 10 defense if you get your pieces together and they're all healthy and they're playing at like they should be. This rookie's looking to be coming to a franchise that could be like a one that could actually develop in the correct way.
Right. Now let's talk a little bit too with Kyler. I think if Kyler Murray leaves, the question is, could Kyler become great with the next team he goes to? I think the answer is yeah, like we've seen with Baker Mayfield, with Daniel Jones, even with Kurt Warner, who was beaten up and left for dead in the New York Giants with Eli Manning taking over for him. He goes out to the Arizona desert, ends up starting for a year, wins the quarterback battle, I believe, in year number 2, and goes on to a Super Bowl and being probably the best Cardinals quarterback that we've seen of all time. If you're talking about longevity, I know that Walter Mitchell, who is going to have the Red Rain podcast, he's going to hold out for kind of his guy that was the longtime Cardinal starter in Jim Hart, because he comes from a different era overall there. But I do think that change is something that can be good. A lot of times when you can have things dry up, teams will be more willing to adjust to a quarterback that they give up more for. And I think that's something that change could also help Kyler Murray, where he's been anointed the starter since week 1, has never had any kind of competition or challenge. And even in this with Jacoby Brissett, he is a competitor. Like, he's a guy who wants to win games. He very well likely, some people will wonder, either shouldn't have been practicing but wanted to try to win his spot back from Brissett, or is that they're practicing because he wanted to play and it's become a kind of mutually arranged decision for him to take a step back, get that foot healed, and potentially take a step back from the franchise overall to allow Jacoby Brissett to be able to thrive. It's also why the Cardinals have been able to bring in another quarterback into the backup spot in Jeff Driscoll. He was with the Cardinals in 2023 for a little while. But it makes it where I'm not going to be someone who's going to lose sleep over if Kyler Murray goes to another team and gets that team to the playoffs, because all you got to be concerned with is not how you failed a quarterback, because that's just going to be in the past. It's stuff that can't be changed. How that quarterback failed you, same thing, at least for that here. I think people can look at this season and go, yeah, there's areas that Kyler Murray has failed the Cardinals this season with the level of play, especially in light of Jacoby Brissett being able to come in and run this core offense a bit better. I don't think that that's anything you can do. All you can do is look forward to see what changes you can make for the future. And that's where I think if this is the last that we've seen of Kyler Murray, I wish him nothing but the best, considering he's had a slew of negative attention, a slew of negative press during his time in Arizona. And he's shown up and has become essentially like the, I think, 3rd or 4th overall passer in terms of the franchise, because they just have not had very much as far as for stability in terms of their history, in terms of just that they've had. And he's been an important part to the franchise. So on one hand, you're sad that things didn't work out, but like we talk about all the time, Marcos, NFL means not for long. Every player has their expiration date and time, almost no matter who they are, whether that's if they're the greatest player of all time, whether they're a player who gets cut and doesn't make it on a practice squad, couldn't play down in a Western is kind of what the old scouting term would be for that. Or if there's someone like a Kyler Murray, a number 1 overall pick who seems on his way out from his franchise into the lengths of another one. Let's talk a little bit as we do with the draft. But before we do, Marcos, did you have anything you wanted to shout out at least there or say with Kyler Murray?
So that's the thing that people have to kind of realize about these quarterbacks and making the resurgence, and this is a way to make themselves feel better about the possibility. Now, I don't know if he's going to find success because of the offensive system and like the whole size thing and whatnot, and what franchise he may be going to, because I do think he's going to be, if he's going to be going anywhere, it's either going to be the Jets or the Browns, or maybe even the Saints. But I think
Dolphins,
the Jets are probably,
that could be another one too.
That could be
if they move on from Tua.
Yeah, that's true. But the problem is that like if McDaniels is there, that's not going to be like, to me, I don't think that's going to be a good fit with Kyler Murray because. So, with that being said, no matter what the circumstance happened, if it doesn't work out here, and let's say he goes somewhere else, let's say he becomes the All-Pro, he goes maybe wins a Super Bowl and whatnot. It wasn't going to happen here for one reason or another. Yeah. So to tell yourself, that could have been us. Like, well, no, that's not true. Whatever circumstance happened, whether it was a light that turned on, whether it was the right system, whether it was the right coaching, whether it was the right players, whatever the situation happened, if you think, oh, well, that could have happened here, we don't know that. We can't be living in a what if scenario. We can just know what we know right now, which is like, hey, this tenure with Kyler Murray hasn't worked out this far. He goes somewhere else and finds success. Well, good for him. Be happy for him, and just say, hey, you know what? The good thing that it worked out and whatnot. But in this current temperature in the system, we can't just keep hanging on year after year, being like, this is going to be there, this is going to be the year, and then hope to God that, like, hey, this is going to be what's going to happen, and it not happening, and we're just hanging on and just kind of sending ourselves back, because Kyler Murray is going on, I believe he's going to be 29 years old soon, and either way,
28 next year, I think, at least. So
we want to get like ourselves on a restart. And what if, well, that's another one if possibility, what if we do find a quarterback that does is able to function this offense, and is one of those franchise quarterbacks, and is on a rookie scale contract? We will never know unless we try it. So to people that are out there, kind of upset about that prospect, is like, hey, don't think about it that way. Think about it as like, hey, we really don't know, but if he succeeds somewhere else, that's not guaranteed it was going to happen here.
definitely agree. So when it comes down to what we're looking at for next year and how that plays into it with the NFL draft, how does that stack up, at least with who are the players that are available? This is stuff that we'll talk about a little bit more, I think, moving forward. One of the things I'd like to be able to bring up, at least, is the thought process of the Arizona Cardinals potentially having to trade for a guy. That's something that I think we haven't really mentioned or talked as much about. But when it comes to next year's draft class, just taking a look real quick at the 2026 NFL Big Board, you'll notice there's no Arch Manning at the top. There is no quarterback at the top of the class. It's not considered to be as good of a quarterback class as that 2024 QB class that had the likes of Caleb Williams and Drake May and Jaden Daniels, the Heisman winner, all going 1, 2, and 3. You've got a best player right now in the country in Ruben Bain Jr., the edge rusher, along with kind of the Isaiah Simmons / do-it-all safety Caleb Downs. Yeah, Peter Woods has looked good. Jordan Tyson out of Arizona State, for your local guys, is kind of considered the best wide receiver in college football who is eligible this year. There's a couple of other guys, such as the classic Ohio State program, who are there. You got another tackle out of the University of Utah who's up there. And it takes a little bit before you get to the top quarterbacks this year. So you got Fernando Mendoza at 6'5", 225. He's kind of taken over the top spot from the LSU quarterback and from Arch Manning. You've got Dante Moore, a more athletic, solid passer that we've seen, who's a little bit more raw at Oregon, who's down there. You got the one that a lot of Cardinals fans have liked, Ty Simpson, who comes out of the pro-style offense. Seems like he tries to model some of his game off of a little more athletic Jared Goff. So you're kind of talking about a guy who doesn't have the arm strength of a Justin Herbert, but has some of that athleticism and mobility. And then you got the kind of wild card, Lenora Sellers, who's a freak athlete with being able to run and throw the ball, super strong arm, but is pretty raw as far as his talent. Those are some of the guys who are there. And when it comes to seeing with how the mock drafts play out, you'll notice the teams that are at the top of the draft order. What's really interesting is, let's say, Marcos, lay in a hypothetical. Let's say that Kyler Murray goes to the New York Jets. Let's say it's a hypothetical. The Jets suddenly don't need a quarterback. They're saying we're going in on 2027 for our quarterback class. The Saints just took a quarterback in the top 40 picks in Tyler Shuff. Do they take another quarterback? I would lean that they could probably, if they have the top overall pick. Titans are probably going to roll with Cam Ward for another season. He's looked a bit better than the worst quarterbacks this year. I think that there's been enough that you've been able to see that it's just a brutal situation around him. I think they'll give him at least one more season before pulling the plug, because he's not having that Josh Rosen year. And there isn't really, I think, a Kyler Murray type of prospect in this draft to replace him with. You're talking about the Miami Dolphins, are a team with Tua that have a large contract to figure out. I think they're a likely team to take a quarterback. Giants just drafted a quarterback, and the Cleveland Browns are definitely with 2 first-round picks in the quarterback market. Same with the Los Angeles Rams, could be in the quarterback market, picking ahead. You'll see in the latest mock draft, they gave the Cardinals Ty Simpson as the quarterback, seeing the Cardinals moving on from Kyler Murray. I think in this scenario, Marcos, you talk about pick 1, pick 2, or pick 3. Cardinals are probably going to be competing with a team like the Rams and potentially trading up for another quarterback. Or maybe the Rams just sit put and let one of those go. Either way, I think this team is too good to end up falling into the top 5. There's a couple of teams who probably will not go with a quarterback. And if the Cardinals want to make a move, I think that either A, you got to make that move this year, find a team that's not going to want to take a quarterback, give up your future firsts if you have to move up and get that guy in house, or B, you trade back from your spot, load up for the opportunity to get a quarterback next year, and then you're just going to be rolling with Jacoby Brissett. Probably spending a second round or a third round pick on a guy, I would think. Hopefully, Monty would spend a third round, use that first on an offensive lineman, use that second potentially on an offensive lineman. Who knows? He may draft a cornerback there just because that seems to be what Monty does when it comes to how he treats the NFL draft. All right, Marcos, that'll be about wrapping it up. Let's do some final thoughts here before we go over some of the last comments, at least. Any thoughts about heading into the Seattle game? Clearly, it's a must-win for Arizona. Clearly, you hope that Will Johnson's going to be able to play. We just don't know what his status is going to be yet. Clearly, this is a division rival, and these next two games are going to be key to figure out if the Cardinals are going to be playing spoiler or will be having something to play for the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And also going with that is to see how Jacoby Brissett is able to handle this type of a defense as well, even though he has played pretty well with the other defenses. So what I'm looking forward to is seeing if this offense still flows the way it flows, if we can go ahead and just have our defense show up with all the players that we hope that we have available, like Will Johnson, and see if for once we can actually smack them in the mouth like they have to us in our home field.
Absolutely. No, I think that's going to be great. All right, let's move now into overtime on the Redbird Reboot podcast. We got Red Feather Workshop talking about a back hip issue for Will. You rewatched that last interception that was made. One of the players on the interception actually fell into Will Johnson. It looked like he may have actually tweaked a little bit of his back or fallen onto his hip. Did not practice here. AZ Jones says that the young defense helps build an offense. This is something we saw with the Legion of Boom. 100% it was both a veteran and a young defense that helped build that offense. All you needed was a star running back and a strong running game. AZ Jones saying Cardinals want to be the Colts. I think we could even say they want to be the Vikings with Sam Bradford that one year. Sam Bradford was basically playing point guard. They moved around to a couple of different players, but he had a phenomenal year with the Eagles the year before, came in, and then they kind of were able to, with Kevin Stefanski, turn that into an NFC, I believe it was championship game appearance, unless I am mistaken. We have AZ Jones saying he'll take Warren Sapp as an outcome versus Darnell Dockett as well. I think all of us would take that, at least for the most part. Also talking about how Garrett Williams made a big difference. He doesn't seem like the lateral quickness is quite back there yet, but hopefully that will come with time. I think he came back probably a week early to try to see if he could help the Cardinals. We have
He sort of did.
Yep, Red Feather talked a little bit about when Cody Simon came in. There were some coverage struggles early, and then he was able to strip the ball for everyone for the most part. We know that you talked about how there was a little bit of worrying for some of that as well. And then the rest of the comments are going to be at least about Kyler Murray. If he's still on the roster and the money becomes fully guaranteed, I believe that's after when there's the start of the league year is going to be part of that. But it's going to be for sure looking at that June timeline because there's a pre-June cap cut and a post-June cut. Everything else around that's going to be part of with how the trades are going to be. And then the last question, which I think is worth some discussion, why didn't they trade K1 last year? And I think it's got to be the contract issue. There would have been way too much money they'd have had to be taking on. I think they also were looking at it saying we could either trade him this past year, not have a quarterback, roll with Jacoby Brissett. If they had missed and Kyler went off and had a phenomenal year with whatever team, it would have probably spelled death for this squad. As it stands now, they get a chance to potentially bring in another quarterback, be able to make up for that, and then potentially get that contract extension. I think a lot of it, too, is saying if he had to have known since the end of last year, I think that you still just had to try it, whether that came from up top or, like I even said, I would have tried to rip the Band-Aid off and traded Kyler Murray last year. I think you could have gotten a late first at the highest for him, if not maybe a second-round pick from a team, and you could have then been loaded up with draft picks this year to kind of tank for a season. But I think the Cardinals looked at their roster, looked at the quarterback and how he played and said, we're going to let this be a year where Kyler's going to prove himself one way or the other, but we also think that we have the talent to be a playoff team. So far at 3-5, that does not look like that is going to be the case, but hope springs eternal after that win against the Cowboys.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought the same thing. I thought because there was that, I think it was like that 6-game stint or that 4-game stint that was in the middle of the season where they just went off, and he had two of his best games of his career last year. There was obviously the Rams, and the Jets was another one. The Jets was a part of that 4-game stint. So they thought for a while, hey, you know what? Kyler Murray with this running game, and with the way that he is operating the offense within the structure, hey, this is going to be something that can work out after all. And let's not forget, he was really good when it came to like executing the play action, when it came to his rollouts and getting his targets deep. Eventually, what happened was after the bye week came back, I think a lot of like things started coming back when it came to like, hey, the scripted plays are working really well, but then now we're reverting back to like what are we gonna do after the scripted plays are over? Kyler Murray has his comfort zone. He likes to be in a shotgun. During the end of the season, a lot of teams, you play a lot of like your rivals down the stretch. They know how to defend you. Obviously, teams have tape on you at that point and know exactly how to execute their defense and how to defend Kyler Murray. So the next year came around and say, hey, we're gonna give him a better defense. We're gonna, run it back with the offense, obviously, and see what goes on. But let's see how this team does with a better defense. It might be even a top 10 unit or whatnot, a top 5 unit. Didn't work out. We didn't get the wins, and it's like, you know what? Gotta start over.
Yep, that's something we'll be having to see. Hey, guess what? That's going to be it for our show today. We've been here for an hour and 10 minutes breaking down a win for the first time in 5 games, first time in 50 days. The Arizona Cardinals managed to get a dub. Thank you guys again for tuning in and joining us. Again, you can make sure you're following us on X at least. Marcos, if you want to shout out where our viewers and listeners of the podcast can find your content.
All right, you can find my content over at the X at Pancake Soul. Obviously, I got the handle a little bit wrong, or I think I have it wrong. I don't know. And then you can find the Cardinal Rule channel, where you'll find our archive stuff. The podcast, you could always follow us live. I would prefer you guys go to the YouTube side so you guys can put your comments in. We can have more interaction with you guys.
Absolutely. And I'm at Blake Murphy 7. You can follow us at Redbird Reboot as well. Guys, that's been it for the Redbird Reboot. You guys have been rebooted, which means it's time for us to shut this thing down. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back, if not later in the week, with a video breakdown of some clips of film. We'll be back on the other side of the Seahawks game a bit earlier in the week. Thanks again for tuning in, and go Cardinals.
See you guys.